Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Thank you for spending some time with us today. Today, we'll be showing you how to maintain and deploy compliant applications and services with Stacksmith and AWS Service Catalog. Some brief introductions here. I don't think much of an introduction is needed for AWS other than to say that they were founded in 2006. And today we'll be focused on their Service Catalog product, as well as talking a little bit about Control Tower, which was just launched last week, week and a half ago at AWS reInvent into private preview. Bitnami, on the other hand, may be one of those names that you haven't heard before. You can't quite remember where you heard it last. We were founded in 2005 and have been an AWS partner and vendor since 2008. Chances are you'll find us in the AWS marketplace by searching any particular technology that you may want to test in AWS. Bitnami provides lots of applications in the AWS marketplaces, including the new AWS Container Marketplace. And we were their launch partner just at reInvent a week and a half ago on the AWS Container Marketplace. Bitnami applications are deployed over 1.5 million times per month. Today we're going to show you how to take Bitnami's technology and package, deploy, and maintain your own applications. We have offices in San Francisco and Sevilla, Spain, and 75 employees globally. Before we get into some specifics, let's just level set on what all of this means. Today we live in a software-defined world where everything is defined as code. This includes, of course, our applications, but also the configurations for those applications, the infrastructure and services that we deploy on AWS, and the frameworks and services that we use to deliver our applications as full deployments. All of this code is are modular in various ways. We're sourcing things from public and private repositories. We're leveraging PaaS services from AWS. Increasingly, we're leveraging function as a service and an emerging marketplace of functions to be able to assemble our applications. Infrastructure as code libraries and snippets are available in documentation and in various sources around the web. And code is often assembled from Stack Overflow snippets. Let's not forget a favorite way to build applications. And because of this modularity, pipelines and process must evolve. We have to look at providing frictionless governance and guardrails to ensure that as we're assembling our applications, we're not getting in the way of delivering them, but we are protecting ourselves and ensuring that we can deliver our results in a compliant and secure way. Self-service driven operations give us the ability to have great flexibility and speed and agility in how we procure these things, but they can also set us up for failure if we're provisioning things that we're not supposed to be, or configuring things in inelegant ways. For example, who can forget the issues with submitting your AWS credentials into GitHub by accident? We need to break down some of the knowledge silos that exist between development, security teams, and operations, and converge in a new DevSecOps-friendly model. And we need to manage configuration drift now across more elements than just our application code. We can optimize our pipelines for trust, security, and speed to ensure that things that we built are done so in a consistent way, that they are done so secured to our trusted sources of inputs, that are sent to our trusted destinations, that are deployed with trusted policies, and that are done in the fastest way possible to accelerate our delivery of new components and applications. And we, at the end of the day, have to accommodate for all of this modularity. I want to pass it to Sanjay to talk a little bit about how AWS Service Catalog and Control Tower help customers control the deployment time decisions and management time decisions of applications in AWS. Sanjay?
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. And thanks for taking the time to join our joint webinar here. Those of you who don't know me, I am Sanjay Garje. I'm based out of Bay Area, California here. and I lead the technical business development for West Coast for AWS Service Catalog and AWS Control Tower, the service that we just did private preview announcement at reInvent. And the goal for today is to give you guys a little bit more nuance on Service Catalog and kind of help you level set on how you can probably leverage something like Service Catalog at your organization. So with that, let's jump into the big picture. What I like to call is the big picture slide, which is right here. So if you are familiar with AWS already, um, that's great. But if you haven't yet kind of dabbled with it, this is how, I mean, today, as of today, we have 140 AWS services after reInvent. We going into reInvent, we had 125, and now we have 140. And as we all trying to figure out, okay, which service fits where, this is a good picture that I like to use as a management tool picture. So out of the 140, the ones that I've listed here are kind of the one that help you manage the other services. And in a broad category, you can break those down into 5 different sections. So obviously, your journey in AWS, it's a cloud infrastructure platform. You want to provision something. And that's where the first bucket comes in. And the couple of choices you have there is you can either use AWS CloudFormation, infrastructure as a code to spin up something, or you could use AWS Service Catalog to do it in a more managed and governance friendly way. The next bucket is configuration management, and you have your OpsWorks EC2 systems manager there. Monitoring and performance, so that's AWS CloudWatch, and you can use that to set alarms, get CloudWatch logs, and do a lot of alerting and Lambda functions to react to what's happening in your production environment. The fourth bucket is governance and compliance, so services such as AWS Service Catalog, Control Tower, CloudTrail Config, basically the building blocks that helps you make sure that not only you're provisioning something in AWS, it's in your governance and compliance friendly way, but it's also, once it is there and provisioned, you the developers and the engineers and the BUs, whoever is consuming that infrastructure, they're not deviating away from your corporate standards. So how do you set those up? So those are the various services you could use to make sure that your cloud infrastructure footprint is cost governed and security governed. And the fifth bucket is the resource optimization. So you have services such as AWS Trusted Advisor that, using the AWS well-architected framework, the various pillars of performance, cost, and fault tolerance, we give you best practices on what you can improve and optimize in your AWS account based on your infrastructure footprint. And if you were to now do a Venn diagram between the number 1 and the number 4, the key takeaway for everybody from this slide would be, hey, if you want to provision something in AWS, and that provisioning has to be governance and compliant way, and it also has to be self-service, then you want to use AWS Service Catalog. So with that, if we want to jump into our next slide, the key takeaway here would be, usually governance and security, these are big terms. A lot of different teams needs to come together, the administrators, the InfoSec team, the architects, and they all need to agree to a certain set of best practices, and AWS has a whole variety of list of best practices with each of the 140 services. Each of that service has a best practice way, a laundry list of things you can do to make sure you're doing things the right way. And then within your company, you also have maybe HIPAA regulation that you need to abide by, or maybe there's a PII, PHI, PCI compliance that you need to make sure your developers and your workloads are adhering to. So that's a lot of heavy lifting that one needs to do. And at the same time, the reason why all the executives and industry and everybody is moving to cloud is the speed, agility, and time to market. So obviously these are two really important aspects, but sometimes in conflict with each other, right? So security wants to make sure everything is blessed before you can go ahead. But at the same time, the CIOs and CTOs and CMOs, they want to do everything quickly so that you can get to time to market fast and disrupt the industry segment you are in. So how do you meet in the middle, right? So AWS Service Catalog gives you the ability to pre-bake, battle test the templates, right? The service catalog products that have been pre-approved by your administrators. So all the heavy lifting and the time-consuming activities are already pre-done. And then you can give those pre-approved sets of services as service catalog product to your end users, right? So the end users can be business users as well as IT users. So a data scientist wants to spin up a new SageMaker notebook instance. Well, they are the data scientists, they are the expert at data exploration and machine learning algorithms, but not necessarily how to spin up a new SageMaker notebook the most secured or governance way in AWS console. So you could create those self-service products. And one simple way to think about this is like a fancy vending machine. So you as the administrator gets to stock that vending machine with all the right products, which are approved by your management and governance and all the InfoSec and the right teams. And as the data scientists, developers, business users, they get to walk to that vending machine, only see the right products that they're allowed to see. So there's access control. So they can discover the right products and vend that out. And every time they vend it, it's getting provisioned exactly the same way. So you get to drive a lot of standardization across your organization. So with that, right? So the key takeaway here is, again, you get to have both. You get to have your security, your compliance, your standardization, and the speed, the agility, time to market leveraging AWS Service Catalog. All right, so with that, I'm gonna hand it over back to Matt.
Great, thank you, Sanjay. So stocking that service catalog with pre-approved compliant assets is a great way to promote this type of agility, self-service, and time to market. But how do you go about stocking those catalogs with the latest and updated assets? And that's what we're going to talk about from Bitnami today. So just to introduce Bitnami here, we make awesome software available to everyone everywhere. You'll find our applications and runtimes in the AWS catalogs, both the marketplace for infrastructure as a service, as well as the new container marketplace just launched at reInvent. They are multi-format and multi-target, taking advantage of infrastructure capabilities, PaaS services from AWS, and all of their container offerings. And we do offer these for free for public usage, as well as we have an enterprise catalog that you can subscribe to in order to deliver these applications to your own private marketplaces and service catalogs. Stacksmith, which we'll focus on today, is a way for you to package and maintain applications with your own specifications. It is the tooling that we use to deliver the application catalog components into the AWS marketplace, put into your hands, allowing you to generate and maintain AWS native templates and images. And we have a public free version for open source applications available, as well as team and enterprise offerings for your commercial needs. We also focus quite a bit on Kubernetes open source. We have a service catalog component ourselves here for Kubernetes clusters in kubeapps if you're looking to deliver inside of EKS and provide that same guardrail-driven deployment experience. You can take a look at kubeapps. BKPR, Bitnami's Kubernetes production runtime, can help you set up all of the essential monitoring, logging, and ingress in your new Kubernetes cluster without all of that heavy lifting. And we have other helpful projects that you may want to explore as well, such as Kubeless. We're a core maintainer of Helm, which is a package management system for Kubernetes. We provide sealed secrets, kubeconfig, and contribute to CNAB, the Cloud Native Application Bundle. And we have key partners across the board, from AWS to VMware, SAP, and others. But let's talk packaging. This slide looks familiar. On one side, just like Sanjay pointed out, you have your organization-wide policy, and on the other side, you have your users that need to consume compliant components and services. AWS Service Catalog provides the organization a way to deploy and update and operate those environments in a controlled and guardrail governed way. And Stacksmith allows organizations to build and maintain those components that you put into that service catalog in a consistent way for the organization, driving security and configuration policies across the board. From a security standpoint, Stacksmith deals with ensuring those applications and infrastructure components are updated, compliant with your policy, and consistently packaged and built. No longer relying on an individual on a team to, write up a Packer file or a Docker file in order to deliver something one time, and then not being able to easily take that and deliver the next application. And you have a situation where everything is kind of built one-off. Or perhaps things that are supposed to be consistent start drifting a bit. And you get caught with some configuration drift where everything is being defined as code. We also promote speed and consistency in your build times, as well as shortening your maintenance cycles, ensuring that, for example, if a critical vulnerability or exploit is affecting a system package that's across multiple Amazon machine images, multiple containers that you might be operating, Stacksmith can identify those and help you repackage, and AWS Service Catalog will help you redeploy those assets into production in a compliant way. This promotes best practices and ensures that the engineering organization, the security organization, and the operations organization all can contribute their best practices to the equation and ensure that there's that trusted handshake in the middle of that handoff. It's no longer the responsibility of an individual or a team that has to build these assets and coordinate all those stakeholder meetings. It's now the responsibility of a process to ensure those things happen programmatically and consistently. So here's how it works. With Bitnami, you can take modular components from our enterprise catalog, your own applications off the shelf, or third-party software, commercial off-the-shelf software, or open source software that you need to package, and you can package that up with Stacksmith, building the artifacts that you need, the images and the deployment templates, migrating applications from your data center or from a lift and shift to AWS, and you want to refactor and start to use more AWS services, you can leverage Stacksmith to refactor those applications to leverage those first-party services, migrating them over successfully and taking advantage of the new services that are offered to you. You can optimize those services and components, ensuring that you have consistency, as well as that you're leveraging the latest best practices that are coming out of AWS. And you can maintain these artifacts over time, both for your internal changes, new releases, new updates, as well as external events, such as system package updates or CVEs that affect those packages. Stacksmith creates those images and those templates, and we deliver them to your repository of choice, allowing you to present those for discovery, deployment, and deployment in AWS Service Catalog, where you can enforce guardrails on the actual deploy time policy. Service Catalog also provides your interface to manage those applications from a self-service perspective on an ongoing basis and update them when Stacksmith publishes a new update into the catalog. Of course, once they're up and running in AWS or your Kubernetes environment, this is where you will operate and monitor those, where your administrators and SRE teams will be involved. Let's focus in on the Stacksmith component first. As mentioned, you can take your apps, your software, third-party, commercial off-the-shelf, or open source, and your configurations and package those together. The inputs into the Stacksmith process are your application code compiled locally or from a CI tool upstream. It is enough configuration logic to get that application running, including your application's dependencies and any boot and configuration logic that it requires. And it's an orchestration template in order to successfully deliver that application to AWS. That input type is just a CloudFormation template. Stacksmith combines all of those pieces to ensure that you have one versionable component that you can use to then deploy that application end to end. Stacksmith also puts monitors on your upstream repositories and source control where you might be storing your applications and their configuration, as well as external sources like the package mirrors where you install system packages from, looking for any updates that are required. So for example, your engineering team submits a new branch of code, commits that to source control. Your CI tool has picked that up, and Stacksmith can pick up from your CI tool to generate the needed artifacts. If you've got a new boot configuration for your application or a new security configuration for your operating system, and you check that into source control, Stacksmith can repackage your components and ensure that they conform to those new configurations. And similarly, if there's an external event like a CVE, a new Heartbleed situation for Apache, Stacksmith will identify which images you've got those packages installed in and prompt you to repackage with the updated system packages addressing that vulnerability. The end results of the Stacksmith process are the images, containers, and the deployment template required to deliver that application end to end. This simple three-step process, feed in the inputs to Stacksmith, we'll take care of the monitoring of those sources for changes, and you can repackage as needed. What are these artifacts? Well, they could be anything from a base Golden OS image, where you need to take the off-the-shelf image from, let's say, Red Hat, and you need to configure your Red Hat image in a specific way to meet your compliance requirements or security preferences. That is something that most organizations have to do today. Although many organizations think about Golden OS maintenance as a point in time. Every 30 days, if they're lucky, every 6 months is more standard, where they're updating their golden image, providing a new baseline, and distributing that out to the organization. Stacksmith can increase the speed and decrease the maintenance cycle here by telling you when your Golden OS image needs to be updated, by repackaging that, and syndicating that out via AWS Service Catalog so that it can be consumed by the organization readily. You may then start walking up the stairs of immutability here by including things like a configuration management baseline, for example, a Chef client image that can be used by your organization if you're a chef shop, configuring things on top using your existing Chef recipes. You may then start offering some runtime specific image artifacts. These are our best practices for .NET Core application or a Java Tomcat application, as we'll show today. And then you may also be ready for containerization, in which you're now required to bundle in your application and its configuration and customization into the image that you create. As you're transitioning from AMIs into containers, there's some requirements that you have to actually put everything in there, and Stacksmith can help you on this journey. For example, if you're that chef shop and you're configuring everything with Chef, bring your existing Chef recipes with you, and Stacksmith can actually leverage those to help you get to these immutable image-based deployments that are container-friendly and ready for the future. Stacksmith also helps you build and maintain your optimized application template. In AWS, that's a CloudFormation template. And the CloudFormation template will include all of the other service dependencies required to deliver your application end to end. the component images, surely, but also the additional PaaS capabilities like an ELB, your favorite PaaS service backend from AWS, a managed database service in RDS or Aurora DB, and any application deployment best practices that need to be configured. For example, how things like CloudWatch or CloudTrail are kicked off. Stacksmith bundles all of these things together so you have one versionable component that you can use to deliver into AWS Service Catalog so that you can deliver these applications components end to end. There are three top reasons to use Stacksmith. One is adding elements of continuous maintenance into your image build and template maintenance process. You have to do this because you are required to do this in order to deliver the applications to the cloud. Stacksmith assures that you have a continuous process, that you are addressing the fact that these immutable assets need to be maintained and regenerated as things change. We do this across your VMs, your containers, your PaaS integrations, and the associated deployment templates to get those delivered. So it's a complete solution for packaging and maintenance at any stage. Start with your golden image if that's what you're ready for, and then progress down the path towards full application-centric DevOps by maintaining associated deployment templates. All of that modularity is now packaged in to one versionable, maintainable component that represents the delivery of your application, your business outcome. There's no lock-in to Stacksmith. You can use your existing tools and automation, your existing CI pipelines, your existing deployment methodologies, and we don't have a DSL in the middle of this. There's no new orchestration or automation language to use. Stacksmith is simply taking over a lot of that heavy lifting that you have to do to maintain these artifacts, but we are building these in a cloud native way. There are no deployment time dependencies on Stacksmith. Out the other end of the process, you are getting AWS native templates and images. Now, once you have Stacksmith packaging and maintaining those artifacts, you've got your build time policy enforcement down. You need to add that deploy time policy enforcement. So those images and containers and deployment templates can be presented and passed through deployed by AWS Service Catalog, giving you a way to provide a self-service vending machine for users, but also in a pass-through model, giving you a way to enforce things like tag policy at deployment time. And Sanjay will speak a little bit more about that in the demo portion here. We also support this concept of hub and spoke control, the ability to centralize your artifact assembly and distribute these out to your deployment accounts. In larger organizations and even in smaller organizations, you're going to have multiple AWS accounts. And the ability to centralize and define the location in the account in which you are packaging and maintaining your artifacts, and then syndicating continuously updated applications out to various teams that are consuming other AWS environments. It gives you the ability to ensure that those artifacts that they're consuming are continuously updated. Service Catalog dramatically reduces the complexity required to operate in these hub and spoke models, and Control Tower adds some extra elements for large enterprises that need to be able to set up these landing zones to begin with. I'm going to kick it back over to Sanjay to recap on why to use AWS Service Catalog, and then we'll pop into the demonstration.
All right, thank you, Matt. So hopefully everyone can still hear me okay here. So as you can see here, right, we have seen those headlines in the newspapers or online where, you know, somebody left something unopened in their AWS infrastructure, and because of the shared responsibility model, we expect the customers to make sure you're doing your due diligence to follow the right best practices and keeping your infrastructure secured. A lot of times the developers who join new to your company who are not necessarily the AWS savvy experts. They may do something in, create an S3 bucket that's open to the world and accidentally now have exposed, sensitive information publicly. And you don't want to end up in that situation, right? So that's just a simple example, and it has happened in the past, right? So what you could do is, as the trusted advisors of your infrastructure footprint, you get to come up with the right best practices, right? And create that secure and compliant infrastructure template. And that template is your service catalog product. So you get to now centrally manage the version control service lifecycle for those respective services. And service catalog is that portfolio of IT services that you're offering to rest of the organization. So the whole ITSM asset management lifecycle becomes very, very easy by leveraging AWS Service Catalog. The other big concern that I hear from customers, especially the large enterprise customers, is the cost governance, right? That a certain team should only be, allowed to spend $10,000 a month, but if they go, or if they try to, reach above that or close to that, then maybe do some sort of mitigation activity where you want to take away maybe their EC2 provisioning access, or notify their management, or do something where you're informing them proactively as opposed to letting them go and cross that and kind of blow the budget. Because a lot of the customers are publicly traded companies, and if they don't have a good cost governance in place, their CFOs are not happy about it. So AWS Service Catalog allows you to create the right foundation, and using the tag option, which we will demo here shortly, is you get to put, using the AWS recommended best practices, you're laying down the foundation for your architecture where you can do some of those cost governance using AWS Service Catalog. Obviously, I talk to a lot of IT operations folks, and sometimes, right, not an exaggeration, but they're spending 50% of their time in doing standard mundane tasks that they're not happy about, but it's like development teams needing to have a DynamoDB table or an EC2 instance, and the EC2 instance needs to have all the right AMIs, all the right JDK version, and everything. So how do you get away from that self-service, like ticketing model, and let the developers do the self-service? So you could create products of those in your AWS Service Catalog. And then if you are a ServiceNow or some sort of ITSM shop like that, we do offer integration with AWS, using AWS Service Catalog connector into ServiceNow, so that when developers or business users, they're using ServiceNow to request keyboard, mouse, mobile phones, what have you, in addition to that infrastructure, they can also request standard pre-approved AWS cloud infrastructure through ServiceNow. And all that is again managed by Service Catalog. So it becomes one more entryway to that vending machine. So the customers, the developers can come directly to AWS Service Catalog, or they can go to ServiceNow or tools like that, and using the integration that we are giving for free, you can leverage that ITSM integration also. And then the big thing is, as Matt mentioned, we live in an evolving world. So there's always new risks and new security holes that we are dealing with. So because you have already, if you are using Service Catalog, you have that pipeline in place. So if you use something like Stacksmith to make sure everything is packaged correctly and has all the right versions, you can then make those golden templates or the golden software services in AWS Service Catalog ready to be consumed. And using the version control that we give you, you can disable and deactivate the previous versions. So that way, when the developers or business users are requesting the new version or new instance of that, they always get the latest and greatest. So all in all, if you want to achieve, governance and compliance, and also at the same time live in this new world of cloud where you don't want to give up the agility, you don't want to give up that time to market advantage, you do want to think about AWS Service Catalog. All right, with that, I'll give it back to Matt.
Great, thank you, Sanjay. It is demo time. So we're going to start with a demonstration here of Stacksmith and packaging an application. Then we're going to pop over to the service catalog, show how applications are reflected back, and Sanjay will give you a tour of the capabilities of service catalog. So this is a Stacksmith project, and a Stacksmith project is part of our user interface experience. Everything I'm about to show you, however, does have an API and a command line interface into it. Stacksmith is often used in a quote-unquote headless model where an upstream CI tool or process is just triggering the Stacksmith packaging process in order to deliver those artifacts in a consistent way. The UI, however, is very useful to be able to spot check my applications, check up on other teams by selecting a different project, as well as being able to onboard new applications or work with teams that don't necessarily have an automated process for delivering applications today. Stacksmith meets you where you are and ensures you have a nice experience for generating AWS native artifacts regardless. So here are some examples of applications that have already been packaged. Everything from a custom application, this Java application here, through to off-the-shelf software like Jenkins, frameworks like Node.js with NoSQL, or an entire WordPress application delivered end-to-end. How you want to create these applications is entirely up to you, but you can use Stacksmith to ensure that you have some consistency in how they're built. We'll go through the exercise of packaging a new application to show you how. Now, in creating a new application, I'm going to put my application owner hat on. I care about two key things here. First of all, which is the application name. We'll call this live demo AWS. And we'll tell it to go to the service catalog. In my integration, I just use this little name here to actually proxy that. This is, of course, entirely up to you how you would like to publish applications through to your service catalog. I'm also going to give this an application version here. I care about this custom app. It's my version 1.4. And I can attribute that version to the artifacts, the application assets that I'm uploading in order to generate those artifacts. I'll then select a stack template. And the stack template provides me a consistent way to deliver this application. Behind the scenes, this stack template is two key components. It's a CloudFormation template, or in the case of Kubernetes, it's a Helm chart. But that's something that the operations team or your DevOps team can contribute as a best practice for deploying an application of a certain type into AWS. It also includes any hardening logic for that application. So rather than maintaining, for example, an individual golden image and then ensuring that that golden image is used as a baseline, with Stacksmith, you can assure that your security team's hardening policies are factored into any image build, no matter what the output is destined to be. So every application packaged through Stacksmith can be hardened according to your security policies, configured according to your operational policies. And as an application owner, I don't have to think about what those are. I don't have to customize and add those to my pipeline. I simply have to call Stacksmith to take care of that, making the trust that that happened programmatic. I'm going to package for AWS, and as you can see, I can select more than one target as well in order to package for multiple targets. And at this point, I'm going to take my application and upload it. Now, again, this could come from an upstream CI tool. Given that I have a Java Tomcat application pipeline, I can actually input any WAR file. So here I've got my custom application. I could also just as easily add Jenkins and package that. I also need to supply some application configuration logic. A build script would be any additional package dependencies that my application has to run that my operations team may not know about, but I know about because it's my application. And then my boot logic to get that running on the OS. My boot logic is right here. And as you can see, this is a fairly simple bash script here that really just configures my database. And it is using some parameters, some of which are set at deployment time, and some of which are defined in AWS Service Catalog as I go to launch this thing. I can also point Stacksmith at my Git repository directly. The benefit of doing that is that I've actually now put a monitor on that Git repository. And when my boot configuration changes, I am prompted, or I can automatically repackage a new version of my application. This entire packaging process takes place securely within your AWS account. So all of the artifacts that I just uploaded, they look like they uploaded to Stacksmith, but they actually just uploaded to my S3 bucket. I'm packaging and building the artifacts directly within my AWS account as well. Now, in the interest of time, we've got a couple that were already built. This one, once it's finished packaging, will automatically syndicate to the AWS Service Catalog for deploy time. I will show you here that we do have an application that's out of date. Here's this customer app again, this WAR file, my repository here. And as you'll notice, I'll also show you the outputs. Here's where our containers are stored. Here's our AMIs and our associated CloudFormation. And as you can see, this was packaged back about a month ago. And there are now 156 updates available for this application. When Stacksmith packaged the application, we took into account all of the system packages that are used to deliver it. We've built a manifest for those. And as you can see, there are quite a few that are now available for update. This is built on CentOS, and the CentOS mirrors dropped a whole lot of package updates just last week, which is where most of these came from. Now, Stacksmith can, of course, continuously repackage as updates are available and deliver through to Service Catalog for deployment. In this case, a manual repackage job will take my same application version and all of these system package updates, as well as any updates to my boot logic, of which there are none since this application was packaged, and it will package it together into a new build. So the capability to maintain these applications, even with 156 updates available, is quite simple. I know exactly what the delta is going to be. I know exactly what system packages are going to be updated. And I have my point in time in my history as well. Now, of course, as I package these things through, I need to control deployment time policy. And this is where the AWS Service Catalog comes in. So I have my products list of available applications that are packaged by Stacksmith, as well as the ability to pop in and see multiple versions of those, when they were built and how they were maintained. I can, of course, curate this in Service Catalog, but this now gives me the experience that I need to get these things deployed in a consistent and repeatable way. Of course, when I click through to launch these products, I'm able to configure any remaining deployment time parameters that were offered to me by my operations team to deliver my application. And in my end result, I have a provisioned product that is fully launched, ready to serve my application with all of the relevant outputs required end to end. This application is my Java application with an RDS backend delivered fully. I'm going to kick this back over to Sanjay to give you a bit more of a complete tour of the AWS Service Catalog.
Excellent. All right. So wonderful. So I'm able to now, I'm going to click on a few things here and give you guys a quick guidance on how and what are the different areas and aspects in Service Catalog that you can use for different reasons and different purposes. So what we are looking at right now is the portfolio list. So as you take away the learnings from today's webinar, right, and you want to now start offering similar services to the rest of the company, you want to think of, hey, how do we categorize and organize those self-service products? So different customers would do it maybe either based on business units. So maybe business unit 1 gets a different portfolio versus business unit 2 gets a different portfolio. Or you could do it where the data scientist has a need to have maybe SageMaker or maybe EC2 with a bunch of their software that they need for maybe RStudio or what have you. And so that could be a portfolio. Maybe the Java developers within your company, they have a separate architecture and maybe they have a different need to have various products. So that can be a different portfolio. So you can do it either by job function, maybe the business unit, the BUs, the business users, the non-technical users have a need to interact with Glue or Athena and they just want to run some reports, right? So that could be a different portfolio. So you have choices here, and you can organize your products in either by BUs or job functions or by teams. And then right off the bat, right, one thing we offer you is Getting Started library. So if you go to the let's say today in your own AWS account, all of you have this what we call the Getting Started library. And let's see here. Matt, if you are able to give me the control. All right.
Go ahead and grab that remote control there, Sanjay.
All right. So if you, I think maybe I'm not getting that control, but Matt, if you want to click on Getting Started Library radio button, it will give you, yeah, there you go. All right, so if you click on that, this will give you a list of Service Catalog products that we have learned from the customers are like commonly used products, like having a private S3 bucket or an RDS that has certain ports disabled, certain ports enabled. So we give you this kind of bootstrapping ability on day one, and then you can take these, copy to your local portfolio, and then tweak it based on your company's best practices and security standards, and then get those pre-approved, and then start offering them to the rest of the IT organization, right? So if we go back now, let's see here. I'm going to try to get that control one more time. If I don't, then I'll have Matt click for us here. All right, so if you click on portfolio list on the left-hand side, that icon, Matt, you're going to get the left-hand side menu. And let's go to the tag option library. So here, what you see is, a lot of customers have the requirement where they want to say, hey, for like one of the best practice is make sure all your AWS infrastructure is tagged, right? And I'll be kind of vocally self-critical. Even though we are supposedly the expert, I don't tag all my AWS infrastructure when I'm spinning up something new because I'm in a hurry, I'm trying to do some demo or what have you. And it's one of those eating healthy food. It's the best practice. We all know to do it, but we don't do it every time. At least I don't, right? So how do you enforce that each time a developer or a non-technical user is launching a new infrastructure, they're tagging those resources? So what we give you is the ability to create tag options here. So you can create tags like cost center or infrastructure environment like dev stage prod or different BUs or teams. And then you can assign these tag option library to your portfolio. So then any developer or end user of Service Catalog, when they are going and trying to provision, let's say an EC2 instance or that Java Jenkins stack that we saw, they have to provide the appropriate values for these tags before they can request that infrastructure. And then Service Catalog takes the values for those tags, and then it in turn makes sure that all the infrastructure that it provisions, it stamps those tags on that infrastructure. So you get this amazing tag governance, right? Which then you can start to do some really amazing things with it, with your auditing and compliance, and even with your cost governance. So that's the overall kind of tag option library. And so if you want to go back to that same menu, we also have the option of SSM actions. So there we go, service actions. So this is where those of you who are in the operational role, so by giving that example, right, maybe your dev teams want to provision certain AWS infrastructure, and they're coming to you, and you're maybe 50% of your time is spent into that. So you could turn that request into a self-service product here using Service Catalog. But then once they provision that, oftentimes during the life cycle of that product, they may want to like maybe restart that EC2 instance or do some operational activity on it. So service action is a way to basically give them that additional operational freedom where you get to define what those operational tasks are. And the way you define those are using our SSM document. We give you some out-of-the-box actions here, like RDS restart, reboot, and EC2 restart as well. But you can define your custom actions and make it fully self-service, so you can really move the needle, not just infrastructure provisioning self-service, but then the operational tasks can also be self-served by the developers. So with that, right, so I think the overall, to kind of tie it all back, you want to kind of marry the governance and security with self-service. Service Catalog is that way to do it, and then use the Stacksmith to patch and make sure that everything that you're self-serving follows the right pattern and the right versions and the right security policies for you. So that's kind of why it's a better together story. So with that, I'm going to hand it over back to Matt.
Great, thank you, Sanjay, and apologies for some of that screen share difficulty here. Thank you for taking us through that. I'm going to show one final thing here with Service Catalog, is just the ability to actually get these things going. So, as I'm going through a launch process here, I'm actually going to be able to give this a name. So we'll call this the live demo launch. And here's my application packaged with Stacksmith. I hit next, and at this point I'm presented with the appropriate parameters defined in my CloudFormation template packaged by Stacksmith, with a curated list of options that I want to give at deployment time, such as setting up some of those parameters for the database. Here you can actually see that we're defining our RDS instance types. Some of these configurations, such as geo-redundancy and other RDS value-add services, are hidden from the user. We don't need to add complexity to them, but our operations team will certainly care about how those are delivered, so they can define those behind the scenes. We'll grab the my SSH key to connect to these things, and I'll leave the retention policies and instance counts just as they are. As Sanjay mentioned, with tag options, I am forced to actually define some of those. So we'll call these, this is dev from our customer app team, and the data residencies in the USA. And those tags will be added once my system is provisioned. Reviewing my options and hitting launch will get me into the provisioning cycle. Once it's entirely provisioned, I have the ability to go to my applications and take a look at those. Here's one that we had just kicked off before we started today. I have my allocation of my DNS name here that I can immediately go to my application, as we saw. And I also have the entire history of how this application was launched and all of the things that CloudFormation did in order to provision my application end to end. The AMIs that I created, as well as the associated database backend. So that consistent experience is now driven at build time all the way through deploy time, allowing you to enforce various policies, both in your configuration as well as in your deployment. Complements of Stacksmith and AWS Service Catalog. With all of that, I would like to invite you all to take a look at Stacksmith. You can sign up for our free public version at stacksmith.bitnami.com and test with some of our sample applications or your open source applications. We can, of course, also get you started on a free trial of our Team Edition and help you integrate your various pipelines, including AWS Service Catalog. And we look forward to working with you through that process. At this point, we're going to open this up for some questions, and I'm going to have Miranda read those for us.
Thank you, Matt and Sanjay. That was great. One question that was answered in the chat, but I just want to make sure we get it for the recording as well, is someone had asked, can I use any application with Stacksmith? And if so, in my daily life, can I use Java with Spring MVC with Stacksmith?
Absolutely. You can create a stack template for any Linux application today. We don't currently support Windows applications, but stay tuned for that in the future. But your Java Spring Boot app, in fact, that's actually what that customer app is. It's actually a Spring Boot app, not just a Tomcat app.
Great. And if we need more clarification on this one, Matt, we can definitely follow up. But someone had asked, how can we save our image files or other documents on AWS?
So the images are stored in your repository of choice. With your AMIs, you don't actually have a choice. They are stored in the account that you build them in, and then you will copy those from your packaging account to the different accounts where you want to deploy those. Stacksmith can automate that process to ensure that those application artifacts, those image artifacts, excuse me, get syndicated to where they need to be. With containers, you do get to define the repository that you would like those to go to. That is the default configuration, is it's going to go straight to Amazon's Elastic Container Registry. But if you have an Artifactory or a private Docker registry that you would like to send those images to, you can define that output location. Stacksmith gives you the ability to secure to your input sources as well as to secure this to your output sources.
Great, thank you. And Sanjay, this one's for you that came through the Q&A. What are the additional benefits of using Service Catalog over straight CloudFormation?
Awesome. The one great benefit would be the controlling your blast radius, right? Because we know using the shared responsibility model, AWS gives you a lot of freedom, but it also gives you a lot of responsibility and making sure that the developers are given just the right access, right? And by definition, on day one, we say deny all. That should be your default security policies. Now, if you give developers the CloudFormation templates and ask them to self-serve, what happens is, in order for the developers to provision something through CloudFormation, they need to have all the underlying IAM privileges to interact with the individual respective services that you're spinning up in that. Versus in Service Catalog, you don't have to give developers those underlying fine-grained privileges. You just give them access to Service Catalog product, and if they were to go directly to EC2 or any of those underlying services, they will not have that access, right? And they will not even have access to CloudFormation. So the only way they can come in is through this front door, and the only door, which is the Service Catalog, and that's where you're stamping their request with the control policies and tag options. So you get this standardized infrastructure in your cloud, in AWS cloud using Service Catalog. So you get to control your blast radius and have a standardized infrastructure deployment within, across your AWS accounts, across your different teams.
Great, thank you, Sanjay. And then Matt, if you would be able to, oh, there's one last question coming in. Can I use Debian rather than Red Hat distribution?
Yes, you can. Not in our public account today, but please do get in touch with us and we can chat with you about how to leverage Debian.
Great. And then Matt, would you be able to go back to the contact slide? We'll just end there. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us at enterprise@bitnami.com, and we'll be sending all of you the recording as well. Thank you both, Sanjay and Matt, for your time. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.